Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I'm going to take a quick break from fishing. I'm out on the lake right now, but I'm going to show you a video today on how to rig a Senko. We're going to show you 6 ways to rig a Senko, all the way from the very basic ways that everybody rigs a Senko and it always catches fish, all the way up to 2 ways that I like to rig a Senko that can catch you a couple more fish that not a lot of people do sometimes. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to show you those guys at the end, as well as some other rigs along the way. And as always, I'm going to explain when and where you want to throw these rigs and stuff like that, so you can catch more fish while you're using a Senko. I know a lot of people talk about a jig being one of the most versatile baits out there, but really a Senko can cover a lot of water and a lot of different places as long as you rig it different ways. And it can be just as versatile as a jig. And if you're new to my channel, head down below and hit the subscribe button for me. I put new fishing videos out every Monday and Thursday, from fishing tip and how-to videos just like this, all the way to tournament footage and other stuff while I'm out there on the water. So if you don't want to miss any of that, hit that subscribe button down below. But for now, let's get into the Wacky Rig and we'll go from there. I'm just going to be tying these up on a spool of line, so they aren't going to be connected to a rod, but I'll give you some details on what you might want to fish with it as well. But I'm just going to show you the basic on a piece of line that I have sitting here in the boat. But let's get started with the Wacky Rig. So starting off with the Wacky Rig, this is going to be the simplest way to fish a Senko and probably the way that catches the most fish. It's going to be a very basic way to rig it. All I use is a VMC Nico hook right there. That's the hook that I like to use the most. I have tried some other ones, but a lot of them have too small of a bend, so you'll lose some fish. With that longer shank on this hook, you'll get more meat on a fish right there. This is only a size 2. You can even go bigger if you want to, but I feel like I lose less fish on the Wacky Rig using this Nico hook. It also comes in a weedless option, so you can use either one. This is just the regular Nico hook right here, and then the other thing you're going to need is just a standard O-ring. You don't actually need this for the Wacky Rig, but I think it helps a lot and it'll preserve some of your baits, especially because my #1 tip I can give you with the Wacky Rig right here: don't use a Senko unless it's a Gary Yamamoto Senko on a Wacky Rig. Any other rig I talk about through the rest of this video, you can use whatever Senko brand you like. This is a Bitters Senko. You can use the Yum Dingers, you could use KVD Ochos, you could use whatever you want. But if you're fishing a Wacky Rig, 100% of the time use a Gary Yamamoto Senko. If you want to like fish practice or fun fishing and use other Senkos, you can. But I promise you, when it's tournament day for me, or even in practice, I use a Gary Yamamoto Senko. The salt content is way higher in a Gary Yamamoto Senko than any other one out there. And it will get you more bites. It has the perfect fall rate. It is easier to fish on a Wacky Rig. It will just make your experience with a weightless Wacky Rig way easier, way more fun. You'll catch more fish. So use this Gary Yamamoto Senko when you're doing it. This is just the Bitters one since I'm just tying up a bunch of rigs and I'm not going to fish this Senko. But for future notice, that's what you're going to want to use. So now to tie this up, very simple. Like I said, I'm tying this up on just a spool line that I got in the boat here, but this would be the line coming off the end of your rod. Typically when I'm fishing a weightless Wacky Rig, I'll put it on a 7-foot medium action spinning rod. I'll put 15-pound braid coming off of that spinning rod for my main line for more sensitivity, and I'll use fluorescent green braid so I can see if a fish bites it, the line will jump, or if they start swimming off to the left or the right, you can see the line going that way and you'll know you have a fish. And then on the end, I'll tie about 6 to 10 foot of a fluorocarbon leader, typically 8-pound test, but depending on how heavy of cover you're fishing around, you can go with some heavier line or lighter line, whatever you feel comfortable with. Tying on your hook at the end of that, simple, whatever knot you like to use best. I use a Palomar knot for everything. But whatever knot you prefer, that is the way that you're going to want to tie this up. And you just tie your hook onto the end just like I did there. So now you can see I have my line and my hook. And this is how simple a Wacky Rig is. Like I said, you don't need the O-ring if you don't want it. But they're like $2 for a pack of 25, and it's going to save you so much money using these Gary Yamamoto Senkos. But if you don't want to, that's a Wacky Rig. right there. That's how simple it is. You hook it right in the middle. Even that one's probably a little too far to the left. You want to try and get it right dead center in the middle, and you can see it'll hang perfectly horizontal like that. That's the action that you're looking for. When you're using the O-ring, same concept here. You just slide it up your line a little bit, or onto your worm a little bit there, and you can see I have that dead center in the middle. What I'll do is I will take my hook and I'll go through one side and out the other, and now I have it wacky rigged, but it won't come off as easy because it'll have that O-ring to hold it on there. So that's the wacky rig. Super simple technique, and it will catch you a ton of bass. So the wacky rig is going to work on the absolute toughest days that you can possibly fish out there. It is just that slow fall always catches fish, and that's why I like the wacky rig the most there. One of the best ways to rig a Senko. Now, going into the next one, this is going to be very easy to transition if you're fishing a wacky rig regularly. Same rig, same rod, reel, line setup that I just talked about. We're going to go into a Nico rig. So a Nico rig, all you're going to do to make this wacky rig a Nico rig, you leave the same hook on there, but you slide your O-ring 3/4 of the way up on the bait there. So now you can see this is the head, this is the tail, it's 3/4 of the way up. And instead of going perpendicular to your bait, you're going to go parallel with it under that O-ring, just like that. Now you can see my hook is in line with the Senko there, and I'm going to take a nail weight or an insertable weight into the head of the bait there. That right there is a VMC, I think they're called like a half moon weight or something like that. Literally any nail weight will work, and all you're going to do is feed it right into the head of your bait here. So I'm pushing this into the head until it hits the top of that keeper there, and now I have a Nico rig. It's really that simple. That's all there is to it. You got the hook and the weight at the end here. All this is different from a wacky rig is that it has a little extra weight now, and this is where you can use whatever Senko you want now because it doesn't matter as much. You're adding weight to it. This will hit the bottom, and you will work it along the bottom like a wacky rig, and the head will stay down because of this weight. So kind of like a shaky head almost. And then your hook point will be facing up and it'll be open, or you can use a weedless one here, and the fish will come down, grab it by the tail, they will get it right in the top of the mouth there. I typically fish this when the water's a little bit too deep to fish a wacky rig since it does fall so slow. Typically I'm fishing a wacky rig in like 4 foot or less. Deeper than 4 foot, I'll probably go to a Nico rig just because it gets down there faster. So this next rig is going to be in place of the wacky rig when there's too much cover to fish a wacky rig. So if you're getting hung up even with the weedless one, typically around wood and stuff like that, not necessarily grass, but you can use this in grass too, it'll work just fine. This is a Texas rig, so this is just a 3/0 EWG hook. You can use a 3 to a 5/0. This is going to be a weightless Texas rig, so we're not going to have any weight on here. I'm just going to tie my hook on with my favorite knot like I have everything else. I would use this on the same rod reel line setup that we talked about for the wacky rig, but you could also put this on a light bait caster with like 10 or 12 pound test, like a medium action bait caster, medium heavy maybe, and like I said, 10 or 12 pound test. You want light line with this, it'll give it more action, and you can actually play with your fall rate. Gamakatsu makes superline and regular EWG hooks. If you get a regular EWG hook, your bait will fall slower. If you get the superline, it'll fall just a touch faster, but it does fall faster because the hook is thicker. So you can use either one just to slightly alter your weight. Typically, I just go straight with the superline. I don't play around with any of the other ones. I will come in the nose of the bait and come down to the bend of the hook there. Then I will punch it out the belly, feed it up the hook shank, and twist it around so that it's the same way as the hook. Then I will measure up right here. I can see that my hook lays flat on the bait if it comes through right here, so I'll pinch my fingers right there, push it through the belly and out the top, and then gently tuck the hook tip right there, and that is a Texas rig. Probably a little crooked. You want to make sure this is straight, but I was just doing it real quick for the demonstration there. But that's the way to Texas rig it. You will cast this near cover and let it sink. It'll kind of have a light fluttering action, but it'll kind of dive nose down first. This is just in place of the Wacky Rig when there's too much cover. This is the only time I really use this. It's good for finesse fishing. I use this a lot because it does catch a lot of fish, and I fish a lot of places that have some cover. Okay, so now we're going to rig this up slightly differently than the Texas rig that I just did, and it's simply a very, very light weight. This works well in Florida too. You slide this on, you can use a bobber stop or you can do without, and then you just tie your hook on with your favorite knot. And I'm going to put this on a 7-foot medium heavy bait caster with 15-pound test, but depending on where you're fishing, you can alter your weight size to do different things. So if you're fishing in Florida, and those fish are in tight lily pads, or they're in the Kissimmee grass, or they're in heavier grass, but they won't eat like a craw bait, and that you know they want a worm, you can go up to a 5/8 ounce weight and peg it and put it on 20-pound test and punch it through that vegetation and still fish a Senko to do that. This would be looped in with the same weighted Texas rig. But the most often way that I fish this is with like an 1/8 or a 3/16 ounce weight, and I'll fish on a lot of those grass flats where those fish are eating a chatterbait or where they're eating a swim jig or something like that. So you're going to Texas rig this the same way that I just Texas rigged the last one, except at the end of this rig you'll have that weight on the front now. So now this bait will fall much faster. You'll be able to cover more water. When you cast it out, it's going to nosedive straight to the bottom, and you'll be able to drag it on the bottom and find areas that these fish are. So if you drag it a little bit, you can get it stuck in some grass, pop it free, and it might fall into a hole in the grass and you'll get bites. Now I'm going to show you 2 more rigs. These are my 2 little sneaky rigs, I guess you could say. Alright, so here's the first one that we're going to do. This one's going to be a little bit wild, but it catches fish. The Nico hook is making an appearance again. It's back. What you're going to do is you're going to tie it on with your favorite knot, if I can get this through the eye of the hook. Tie it with a long tag end. You can probably tell where this is going already. Now, we have our hook tied on with our favorite knot. Now, you're going to take this long tag end and you're going to run it back through the front of the hook. So hook point facing up, find the eye of the hook, go down through it, come out the bottom. That's going to keep your hook standing straight out on the line. This is a drop shot rig. This is what we're tying up, and we're going to take our weight with the little clip and we're going to clip it in on the bottom. So now we have a drop shot rig. We got our weight clipped on the bottom here, we got our hook up here. Now I did not tie this how long I would usually tie it, because then it would be out of frame, you wouldn't be able to see what's going on. Typically, when I tie this, you need a minimum of a 2-foot leader, typically like 2 to 3 foot. Like, it's a long leadered bait. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take that same O-ring we used earlier, and we're going to slide it on our Senko here. You could use a 4-inch Senko for this. It might work a little bit better if you're fishing for smallmouth or spotted bass. But if you're fishing for largemouth, you can even go stick with the 5-inch, it'll work. What we're going to do is Wacky Rig our Senko on our drop shot. So now we have a Wacky Rigged Senko on a drop shot. You can throw this out there into 20 foot of water if you want. This drop shot will sink all the way to the bottom. Your weight will hit. Then you'll have this 3-foot leader. This is not 3 foot, but like I mentioned, you'll have a 3-foot leader. This will land on the bottom, and then your Wacky Rig will engage the last 3 foot. So your bait will fall like a standard weightless Wacky Rig for that last 3 foot. So you're presenting a weightless Wacky Rig in 20 foot of water by using this drop shot weight and a long leader. Then when your bait hits the bottom, you can Wacky Rig it back up off the bottom, drag it a little bit forward, and then kill it, and it'll Wacky Rig back down like a weightless bait because your weight's still on the bottom here. So you can present a Wacky Rig in very, very deep water with this technique here and catch a lot of bass that don't see it out there, nor have they seen it since spring, because they left shallow when people were throwing Wacky Rigs at them. They went offshore, and they haven't seen this because no one throws a Wacky Rig that deep. So give this one a try, and you can present that Wacky Rig pretty deep. Like I said, 4-inch Senko, you can catch some smallmouth with it. You can tweak this however you want, but same rig that you would for any other drop shot. Same rod reel line setup I mentioned in the first Nico and Wacky Rigs. Alright, so we're going to tie this rig up now. And the first thing we're going to do is take leader off of our spool and cut it so that we have some leader. Typically you would use lighter leader than on your rod. So this setup, we're doing a Carolina rig. I would fish a 7'6" medium heavy action rod. I would have 17-pound main line, and then I'd take 15-pound leader. This is a 1/2 ounce sinker. I fish this in less than 15 foot of water. 3/4 or a 1 ounce, I'll fish in deeper than 15 foot of water or when there's a lot of wind. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my sinker on my line, slide it up there. The next thing I'm going to put on is a bead, and I'm going to slide that bead on there. And then the last thing I'm going to put on is a swivel, and this will end the main line section of your rig. So if you want to learn more about how to fish a Carolina rig, how to tie a Carolina rig, all that stuff, I have done a video on it already. I will link it above right here, and I'll also put it down below somewhere, hopefully. But this is the basics of just rigging up a Carolina rig. So now we have our main line section done right there, and we're going to take our leader that we cut earlier, and then we're going to tie on our leader however we want. So we'll go ahead and tie on our leader here. Typically I Palomar knot everything on like I mentioned, but I did this differently, and I'm going to have to use a different knot here. But if you want to learn how you can Palomar knot your Carolina rig on, go ahead and check that video out that I was talking about. You can do a Carolina rig with Palomar knots on all 3 connections, and it'll work just fine for you there. And then we're going to take our Texas rig hook from earlier, and we're going to go ahead and tie this one on with our favorite knot. Now I'm going to go back to the Palomar knot, but like I said, it doesn't matter, whatever knot you like to use. So now we got that one tied up, and we have our whole Carolina rig done. That was pretty easy, pretty fast. Seems like it takes a lot of time, but it's a really simple rig to tie up, and this rig kills it on Tennessee River ledges and stuff like that. So you have your weight, your bead, your swivel, and then a leader coming down to here, and then all you're going to do is Texas rig your Senko on here just like we did in the other couple Texas rigs, and we'll put that on just like that. So now we have a Senko and a Carolina rig weight up here. The reason this works so good is because a lot of people, when they fish a Carolina rig, are going to fish like a full-size brush hog or something like that, or a 10-inch worm, or they're going to be fishing a football jig or a deep crankbait or a big spoon, big swim bait out on those ledges. If you drag this guy down there, it's going to get to the same depth, and behind it is going to just be a weightless Texas rigged Senko. So you're going to get a finesse presentation behind this down there in deep water where these schools of bass are, and they don't see this very much. So you're going to get a lot of bites from fish that haven't seen this presentation before, and fish will always eat a Senko. So if you can present a Senko down there in 20, 30, 15 foot of water, they don't see that much down there, and you can catch them very, very well on this technique. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video talking about some ways to rig a Senko. I know there were some crazy ones in there mixed with some regular ones. I'm sure if you know the regular ones, you've caught fish on them before. Maybe give those crazy ones a try, and you might be shocked at how many more fish you can catch on a Senko, or how many more fish you can catch in general in some of these places when the fishing gets tough. But if you never fished a Senko before, try some of those standard ones, the Wacky Rig and the Texas Rig, to get started with this type of bait. It catches a lot of fish. So if you've never fished a Senko before, you need to go out and get yourself some and give them a shot. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of my fishing tips coming up. Thanks for watching.